Hello and welcome to this panel discussion focusing on digital for the next normal, lessons for retail banking. And I think we will also touch maybe other areas of banking as well. Before we start, let me introduce the panelists in some kind of random order to admit that, but nevertheless, ladies first. So we have with us Shanti Ekambaram, Group President at Kotak Bank, and she will talk a little bit about her role and her bank later on. Then we have Miguel Riotinto, the Group CIO of Emirates NBD, and Samir Kare, Group Chief Information and Digital Officer. I didn't want to reduce your responsibility at FMB Capital Holdings. And with that, maybe we can start with a quick introduction where you can talk about your role and the business areas your bank is working in. Maybe starting with you, Shanti.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Shanti Ekambaram, and I'm Group President, Consumer Bank, covering the entire spectrum of consumer liabilities, assets, and the digital business. Little bit about Kotak. We are amongst the youngest private sector banks, but the second highest in terms of market capitalization in the country. We're very large retail focus. We're about 1,600 branches now, and multiple channels for our customers across the length and breadth of India, be it branch, contact center, of course, digital assets of net, mobile, and our chat bots, our IVR, and everything. We also have a very large suite of retail asset products, whether it's for the individual customer, home loan, credit cards, personal loans, and for the business customer, which is our working capital loan against property. So our whole aim is deep India across metro, second-tier metro, semi-urban, rural, and building the whole spectrum. And we have seen India change dramatically in the last few years, but I think the future will be even more as Indians have adopted to technology, digital, and changed the way they do banking.
Thank you very much indeed. And again, in random order, Miguel, would you like to continue?
Hi, a pleasure being here. So Miguel Riotinto, I'm the Group CIO of Emirates NBD. Emirates NBD is one of the largest banks in the Middle East, the largest retail bank in the UAE. It has an international footprint. We are present in Egypt, in London, in Saudi, India, Singapore. And recently, last year, we bought one of the largest private banks in Turkey as well. As Group CIO, I'm responsible for all group functions. We operate out of the UAE, supporting all these entities. The bank is 23,000 employees, about 1,000 branches. It is about 300 billion in asset size, and quite a very profitable bank. So $2.5 billion in net profit, and cost to income, which is about 31%, just to characterize Emirates NBD for those that are not so familiar with the bank. We serve all customer segments, from corporates to retail, and across these geographies. And of course, Emirates NBD is known for being quite innovative here in the region, and since many years ago, very focused on innovating through technology. And I think the bank is recognized around that. Now, in my role as Group CIO, I'm responsible for enabling the business with technology for them to be able to innovate in all these segments and catering to all customer needs.
Thank you very much for sharing these impressive numbers. And I guess last but not least, Samir, over to you.
Thanks, Josh. So I'm Samir Kare, and I'm the Group Chief Information and Digital Officer for FMB Capital Holdings. FMBCH, as we call ourselves, we are headquartered in Mauritius and have a very Africa-focused banking business through our brand called First Capital Bank in 5 African countries, which is Malawi, Botswana, Mozambique, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. The focus of the banks, depending upon the geography, it's a very corporate, commercial, and retail banking focus in a couple of geographies. And my remit is to actually make sure that the operating platforms and technologies are working, functioning absolutely as per industry standards and norms and are state of the art, as well as leverage these platforms to make sure that digital offerings to our customers, whether it's in terms of their customer journeys or whether it's in terms of access to new channels to access banking, etc. These are the kind of solutions which are driven. We also have COE, Center of Excellence around cybersecurity and around data and analytics, which is also completely part of my responsibility for all the countries. So that's what FMBCH and I represent. Thank you.
Thanks again. So I guess we now have provided some kind of good foundation for all in the audience to put your responses into a better perspective. Thank you for that. And so let's start the discussion, maybe with a topic that many decision makers discuss these days. And it's certainly about transformation during the pandemic. According to Forrester's survey data from short before the pandemic, only 14% of financial services firms believed that their business applications and infrastructure put them in a good position to best serve their customers. And during the pandemic, as we all know, some banks had to quickly update existing systems, create new business solutions at a very fast pace. And our observations show that banks with flexible and agile application landscapes fared much better, particularly during the early months of the pandemic, because they could leverage technology and business capabilities that they already had in place. And both approaches contributed to some observers' perception that banks delivered more digital banking capabilities in 3 months during the pandemic than in 3 years before. Whether this is true across the application landscape is a different question. So maybe let me start, if you like, with a question to all three of you. And so how did you perceive the early month of the pandemic from a transformational perspective, from an acceleration perspective? What worked well for your institution? What are the technology and business capabilities you learned to appreciate most during the early months that helped you navigate through the pandemic? And how has your institution been able to proceed with its existing transformation plans? Or to summarize all of my questions here, certainly many of them, what lessons did you learn that could be valuable for others in the early, let's say, hopefully in the major part of the pandemic? Let me express that much indication of hope. And if you like, maybe in a different sequence now, Miguel, would you like to start?
Yes, so I would argue that at least from the Emerson BD perspective, we were already undergoing a massive transformation. And I believe that even before the pandemic, the more forefront businesses that understood that technology is changing everything is actually eating the world, and these entities, these enterprises had, I'm sure, already transformation plans ongoing, which was the case of Emerson BD, and that need, that urgent need to transform and digitize, I believe was already there and quite well understood. So this is why the bank in 2017, it actually decided to invest about $500 million in a comprehensive IT transformation to enable digital innovation in the business. That was ongoing when we, at the beginning of 2020, when COVID hit us. And I believe that instead of hindering these plans, I think it actually contributed to a massive acceleration of digital, at least in our enterprise. A lot of the foundations we had laid out in terms of the collaboration tooling that had been put forward, in terms of our ability to run call centers from the cloud, in terms of our ability to dial in and access our applications, and even the functionality that we were rolling out to customers. I'll give you two examples: the self-service enablement of trade finance with for our corporate customers that where they can access and manage these businesses completely from their premises. All of that was really a fantastic asset when COVID hit us. And beyond what was already ongoing, suddenly the greater there came a greater urgency even for us to make a lot of these functionalities, a lot of these initiatives available to business much earlier. So for us, it was an acceleration of the plans that we had, and of course a greater urgency for agility, for flexibility of the systems, for transformation that was already there and was ongoing. But I think that while that was happening, I think it now in hindsight, if you look back to 2020, it also was an accelerator of change in terms of the competitive landscape. We see that after that initial dip, we are seeing that in our markets, the players that were better equipped, that had the best self-service functionality on their front ends, that were most digital in their processes, that were most zero-touch processes in the zero-touch processes, they were the most STP. Those banks, they are coming back stronger. And we see, for example, in Emirates NBD, we clearly are gaining market share in terms of the transactional banking. We are gaining market share now as we recover. And we are coming back from the perspective of now the beginning of 2021, and still a lot has to recover yet. I think we are coming back stronger than before. So never before, I believe, such a discontinuity happened, something that really has changed the landscape, changed the urgency for digital and agility. I think it's a fantastic opportunity for us in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. So you're basically saying that the agility you built into your bank prior to the pandemic helped you to become successful later on.
Correct. So in 2017, we launched this IT and digital transformation program. And as you know, to really transform to the core, it's not just about touching one thing. It's a lot of things that we have to change. So from how we manage IT from the infrastructure perspective, how to learn from the cloud natives on how they manage and deploy and run infrastructure, to changing the application architecture. So how we integrate and leverage API enablement, how you couple the domains in a way that is that uses standardized, well-defined APIs, RESTful APIs, the way that you organize yourself and deploy agility in the teams, the way that you blend IT and business through agility and through product ownership and agility in the teams, the way that you manage even security. So the way that you bring security very early on in the designs that you do, and not just as a bolt-on capability. So that was already ongoing, and that investment that was launched in 2017, what we were 2/3 into that program, with a comprehensive transformation of all the stack in IT, from the human resources stack, from the operating model, through to the technology stack itself. Now, these were absolute critical to have capabilities once this COVID situation hit us. I believe that if some of the investments that we've done before were not there, the bank would have a very, very difficult time to support the ongoing business and to serve the customers. So because of some of these because of this transformation, some of the initiatives that were put forward, in a day we managed to send a 1,500 call center to the homes of our agents, so they can connect and answer customers from the homes. without having to be physically present in our premises. So 15,000 people were sent home in 2 weeks, and they continued to support and operate the bank seamlessly from their homes. And so as you understand, if you look at a traditional bank, doing this with traditional stacks, very rigid systems, no collaboration tools, no digital enablement, would have been extremely difficult. So I think that without the foresight of knowing that COVID was coming, I think in any case, transformation and digital transformation is an absolute requirement for any enterprise, especially in banking.
Thank you very much for these insights. And I have a few follow-up questions, and I may ask them, time allowing, later on. So for now, maybe we can move forward, and maybe Samia, you can share your views on, to summarize my first question again, what lessons did you learn that could be valuable for others from the early times of the pandemic, or what helped you to navigate the pandemic?
Thanks, Jos. The experience, though at a very different scale, was very similar to what Miguel said, and I'd like to just kind of qualify my response with the fact that Africa is a very unique continent with a very different set of challenges. The maturity level in terms of banking and digital governance and solutions is varied, and it is still different across the 5 countries of operations as well. So the challenges realistically for us at the beginning of the pandemic last year, firstly, was dependent upon how the countries kind of economically as well as regulatorily kind of reacted from a government perspective, etc. For example, couple of countries decided to go into lockdown, and there the challenges were very different. They were similar to what Miguel said. How do we enable our staff who would be unable to access their offices to service our customers? And also in terms of just kind of reacting to the change which came about almost overnight in terms of operating, wherein you had to get into a work from home scenario. That's where the agility in your underlying infrastructure was a critical part to us. And what I mean by that is that a couple of years back, we had embarked on this journey to set up a centralized group ecosystem, which involved access to almost thin client kind of an environment, which enabled anyone anywhere to log in using their VPN connections, tunnels, etc. onto servers, which helped them kind of operate. So that part was easy. What came next was actually a bit of a requirement, or in terms of getting clarity in terms of day-to-day transactions of customers, with customers also at a very different maturity curve in terms of still wanting to access branches, or the high demand for cash in terms of transactions. So transaction banking had to be enabled at that level, wherein we still had to ensure that while there was a skeletal staff at branches coming in and servicing the customers, we still had to make sure that the physical cash ecosystem was well supplied, and there was no such concern amongst our customers. On the corporate banking side or the commercial side, it was easier because most of the corporates also were going through the same concern as banks, wherein they were operating from home. So we had to react in a different manner in terms of enabling our channels to do much more in terms of transactions, rather than making it so, basis the culture and the economic models that operate in Africa, there is a huge mix of channels plus paper related transactions as well. So there is that good mix of paper supporting transactions which still happen. So STP is not fully there yet. So we had to actually make sure that those elements were well controlled or taken care of. Even from a post-pandemic regulatory inspection perspective, for example, we had to make sure that our processes during the pandemic were compliant. And finally, to add a point to this, one of the biggest learnings which we had out of the pandemic or during the pandemic was that why your customers' transaction capabilities can be enabled through channels, people's work from home can be enabled through, VPN, etc., and you can have all the RPA deployed in the backend to make sure that the systems are working up and running. Cybersecurity is going to be one big thing which needs to be thought through during this this pandemic. The reason being two things that we kind of thought was logical. One was that with the high and very quick digitalization of our processes, this was exposing a lot of our systems onto the public internet and other kind of channels. So we had to very quickly adapt to putting in essential security covers in place as well. And the second part that we anticipated was that with the economic harsh realities which will kick in with the general population base, we did expect a lot of people to react and kind of try and attempt some activities which could result in the outsider threat kind of a perspective. So cybersecurity was an additional element to what Miguel said, and what we had as challenges. I think for that we were able to react very quickly and get into an MSS model, which we were almost in the last stages of deploying. So managed security services, as well as with MDR, managed detection and response. These were elements which we were very close to going live. And in fact, we accelerated those programs into the first month of the pandemic itself, and we went live. That was the added point, which I thought was a quick learning. And I think it continues with even 2021 right now. We're seeing a lot of increased attempts, threat vectors, trying to take advantage of certain customers in terms of OTPs and your two-factor authentications. So you need to figure out and react to these kind of scenarios as well, because while we may enable it from a technology perspective, the customer and transactions and the bank reputation, etc. So that's the added element I just wanted to put forth as a learning and something which we will constantly now have to increasingly be aware of and react to.
Thank you very much indeed. And what I hear here is basically something very similar to what Miguel said, and what we also observe when it comes to talking to Forrester clients, to other banks. Today, to cope with all the different threat scenarios, you have to design for security as opposed to patch security into a system, right? And at the same time, you mentioned cash, and I've found this very interesting. Some time ago, I talked to a bank, I think it was in Turkey, and they had to consider a very interesting situation in that they streamlined some kind of process aligned with complaints at ATMs. So the streamlined complaint process was to reduce the queue length at ATMs in case of complaints. Did you have similar scenarios, or was this not an issue for you at all? Cash.
No, that wasn't a concern, because as I mentioned, the people were also kind of going through the hassles of curfew situations or lockdown situations. So we didn't face that concern.
Great, thank you. So it was likely more some kind of more local issue for that bank. Thank you. With that, Shanti, over to you. The question is basically, as I mentioned earlier, what lessons did you learn from the hopefully major part of the pandemic?
Okay. So as far as Kotak is concerned, we have always been digitally focused and mobile focused. In fact, 70% of our active customers are either transact through the mobile and digital. But when lockdown hit us, and there was a complete lockdown declared, but they also said banking is an essential service, and thus the branches will remain open. So the first and the foremost thing we had to do was ensure the safety of our employees and our customers, because you couldn't have them 100% staffed. So we went into safety and immediately, whether it was masks, sanitizers, rostering, putting the ability for customers to book an appointment if they wanted to come into the branches and discourage them to say, you can do your transactions sitting at home. The second thing was the call centers are very close spaces and we had to enable work from home for all our employees. So while a lot of them already had laptops, VPNs, we were working from home, many, the call center had to be enabled completely through BDI, VPN networks, and we had to put that infrastructure in place instantly so that customers were not impacted. Third, we still had 20-25% of the customers who were coming to branches, and we had to ensure them sitting at home, how do they do their transactions, and we had to train our RMs, make sure that through digital, through request, that these transactions were put in place. So that took up the first, almost 15, 20 days or 30 days to say, we have to remain open. That is the mandate. We are an essential service, safety of our customers. We have to make sure we are working 24/7 for our customers and all our channels are activated and the infrastructure put in place. Cybersecurity or security was always there, but when you have so many VPNs and you have the VDI network, we had to step up the surveillance and the security at all points in time because the number of digital transactions went up. Second, we immediately beefed up the resilience of our backend system because during the pandemic, people moved to doing more transactions in the mobile payments, even for bread, for small things, etc. Everything moved to digital payments. So the resiliency at the backend was very important. So I'm saying enabling the networks, which was the infrastructure, laptop, VPN, which was there, but increase it. Second, security beefed up and resilience of our system to be able to take the load. And fourth, was education of our customers for those who were not digitally savvy to say, sit at your home and we will enable transactions. So we were alive, kicking as a bank right through when it was announced on 15th of March or 20th of March, right through April, May, June. Now, one of the most important things that we do as a bank is acquire customers. We as Kotak were the first bank to introduce, a product called 811, which is a digital savings account. Download and you can open an account in less than 3 minutes. But it had a physical KYC with a biometric. Physical means you had to go to the branch or meet a salesperson and put your KYC, Aadhaar-based KYC. We introduced, the regulator helped us, and we came up with something called a video KYC. So once you download the app and open an account through video KYC, you can finish it and your savings account is open. We were the first bank to introduce it sometime in April last year. Pandemic was in March and it was in the works and we just sort of introduced. So we ensured that our acquisitions happened. Government rolled out a very large lending program to MSMEs. Yeah, they basically guaranteed a rollout program and told banks, if you have exposure, 20% of the exposure you can give to MSMEs, incremental government will guarantee. But there was no physical ability. So we very quickly put up a completely digitally signed document, what we call DigiSign, end-to-end document processing to make sure our MSMEs could execute the document and disburse the loan. Our loan market share is 2%. We disbursed close to 6% of these MSME loans that the government had asked us to mandate. So whether it was and on the liability side for transactions, we brought in a lot of innovations. Customers were buying groceries online. We brought the grocery into our app, what we call the K-Mall. We have a little, e-commerce within our app itself. We tried to do what customers could do sitting at home into our app. We started servicing through WhatsApp, through our bot. We even started collections, which was very important on the asset side. We started through the bot. We had the Ubona bot system. Collections end-to-end digital. So across our businesses, we enabled our frontline, middle, and back to be able to do transactions for customers sitting at their home and for us working from home as well as partly working in the branches and the offices. All of this in this time frame, and that was the peak was till June. Thereafter, things started moving out and many things started, sort of moving. But we just simply leveraged our digital assets. We, built on top of it. We built many things that we could quickly work with partners and bring them into the app. We educated our customers. We increased our resilience. We increased our security. And we were able to function as a bank and much more than what we did in terms of what we could do working at home. In fact, I just to say I worked double than what I was working in office when I worked from home. But that is a fact of the matter, that we were able to meet everyone because you didn't have to commute, you didn't have to travel, and you could get your work done, and so much more. So I think what we learned is that nothing is impossible. If somebody had told me in January, February that you could work from home, run the bank, do more transactions, increase your business share, I would have said you're smoking too. It's not possible. But I've learned nothing is impossible. Second, you have to move at speed. And you cannot miss any aspect, detailing into every aspect, especially when you are, in a digital world. You have to look at things very closely. Security, data privacy, right? Because people are working from home and, call center looking at data. How do you increase your surveillance? Because data privacy is important. Resilience of your system is important. But you have to enable, and you got to be in the journey that your customer is, and help your customer. So if you are embedded in the journey that your customer is, even during pandemic, you will do well as a bank. So we did many things. I'm not going to get into the details of all this, but in that peak period up to July, which is when, customers really sat at home, and a lot of us sat at home while the branches and we were open, we were able to stabilize, grow, and increase our franchise. That time, most people were worried about health. Health insurance was a big product. We quickly digitized end-to-end in terms of customer being able to buy a health product at the click. And you won't believe what happened in April, May, June. They were just, so you got to think out of the box, you got to execute out of the box, keeping security, size, resilience in mind. So what it taught us, like I repeat, is nothing is impossible. You got to cut out the noise and keep executing very, very closely. Don't miss out on the details. But I believe COVID has leapfrogged digital by 4 years. It is here to stay, and you got to sort of think out of the box, execute out of the box within the framework, keeping customers.
So what you're saying is that COVID basically accelerated transformation significantly.
Absolutely.
And given my earlier statement regarding 3 years and 3 months, do you think your 4 years apply to all of the bank, or are there still areas where you still need to improve?
So my broad belief is that, I say loosely 3 to 4 years, that COVID has probably accelerated digital by 3 to 4 years. But, the business customer in India, once August happened and they've come back, cash had reduced in the system dramatically. Cash is now back even pre-COVID. So they are still attuned, the small, the MSMEs, etc. in India still, deal in the physical world and in the cash world. I think creating solutions that will give them the confidence and the, incentive to move is very important. What is good in this time is customers were willing to adopt. We had an 87-year-old surgeon who had never done mobile or didn't know what any digital, but had to pay a staff. He learned how to use mobile banking, so people adopt. So we have to be at it, nudge, push, encourage, incentivize, but I think it will be a transformation for banks, both from a customer experience perspective, costs and efficiency, to keep nudging as we go by.
We now talked a lot about the past and how it basically influenced how you navigated the pandemic. Maybe you can use this as a starting point to look at the next steps, at your plans for the future, as 2021 is not yet an old year. And I think we all hope that we will reach the end of the pandemic in the foreseeable future, or that the situation will at least become more manageable and certainly less fluid than in 2020, that we basically will see a more stable new normal. So my question to all of you, this one is a short question, by the way. So what are your key priorities for 2021 beyond when it comes to both technology and business transformation? And how has the pandemic potentially influenced and changed your priorities? Maybe Samir, you may want to start.
Thanks, John. So I think I'll start with something very different, and then I'll talk about the 2021 priorities because it's linked. I think one of the key things is to get the design right. And the design right, like what I mean is you need to build for agility, you need to build for reacting to sudden uncontrollable external factors like this pandemic. You need to be ready for reacting to such kind of incidents which will happen and which will continue to happen. So that has to be the core and critical base of any strategy. So you get your design right, and don't miss out on any element of whether it's transactional capabilities, whether it is digital capabilities, whether it's customer service, whether it is regulatory technologies, or whether it is anything to do with cybersecurity. You got to get the design right. And that's what's leading us into 2021, wherein the journey that we started off in the group around 2019, which was based around enabling a lot of channels, rehashing the way the customers interact with the bank for their transactional services or for their banking, customer education as well, because in some of the geographies on certain channels, we had to educate people on how to use those channels as well. Those were the elements which we had started off on that really helped us in 2020 to kind of react and make sure that the customers were not inconvenienced and could carry on their activities to whatever normalcy percentages that were applicable in the country, but not on account of the bank. The bank was there to support. That's something which we will grow further in 21. In fact, some of the things that we are working on or which we were implementing in 2019 around our RPA strategy, for example, that's something which will be accelerated in 21. This is to ensure that 24/7 capabilities, STP capabilities can increasingly be offered to customer across various products which they use or engage with the bank. Our entire channel strategy was essentially around internet banking, mobile banking, but we moved and we'll be launching a few capabilities in this quarter around social media driven channels because especially for the payment side of things, I think that brings in an additional convenience to the customers. So that's something which we are contemplating, and that's a priority in 21. Also on our cybersecurity and resilience perspective, we are actually very focused, and we have had many drills in the year 2020 wherein we utilized our work from home kind of a situation to kind of practice these scenarios wherein how quickly could we switch over from, let's say, our production sites to our DR sites. Not just the entire set of servers, but just one application. Maybe it was a core banking or it was a switching piece. So we've done a lot of those practices, and we intend to kind of make sure that in 21, that's a flip of a switch for us. It's as convenient as that. And this will enable us to increasingly monitor and keep our resiliency up, even if, let's say, the pandemic situation continues deep into 21 as well. And let's say we still have work from home. That reduces our dependencies on engineers being available at data centers, etc. And finally, on the application side, the choice is more and more looking at how quickly can we increase our cloud deployment of applications, mainly because that's something which reduces our workload in terms of data center management and those kind of engineering that we need to do. And it's a higher dependency on connectivity and centralized setups managing it for us.
Maybe, Shanti, you would like to also have a look at, give us some idea about your 2021 priorities.
3-4 key points I'll talk about. The first is continuation on the digitization, automation, digital products and services. I'll start first with digitization. I think I'll start front to back. The customer experience layers, we have been constantly changing, upgrading, because customers want to experience their bank like they experience many other things, including the social networks that they are in. Yeah. Second, when they consume products and services, it has to be end-to-end digital and try and reduce any physicality, whether it's paper or interaction. Yeah. Third, personalization, use data. And, I didn't talk about that, but we did a lot of work on data and analytics and use AI, ML, use data, big data to really look at how can you up your, N-1 personalization for customer on products, services, cross-sell offers, etc., which is a important. Cybersecurity is even more critical as the world has gone digital, and I think frauds we can see globally, locally are on the rise, and it's one of a big area of constant investment and perimeter, monitoring and increasing your cybersecurity, as well as resilience of your systems. I think as volumes go up, resilience is equally important, and resilience is very critical. Third, as you go digital, time to market, speed, and agility for either new products, services, or even the way customers consume is very important. So whether we recently upgraded our Finacle system, we have got so many more APIs, flexibilities. We live in an ecosystem and partnered in an ecosystem, and that's been very critical as far as we are concerned. So I think for us, everything right from customer to the back end. Back end, I talked about automation, RPA, what Samir talked about, robotics, all of that. So we will focus on the front, middle, and back. But the mantra is digitization, automation, security, resilience, end-to-end, robotics, hyper-personalization, continue the path of this as we go into 21 and going forward.
So very impressive plans for this year. Thank you very much. So Miguel, I guess it's now time for your take on 2021.
So from Emirates NBD's perspective, I think a lot of the themes that were there before in terms of our IT and digital transformation, those will continue. And we still have some way to go to complete what were the objectives of our original IT and digital transformation. But I think some business and technology themes have risen to a higher importance now. On the business side, I would just highlight that we see an uptake from the consumer behavior perspective on the digital value propositions that banks can put forward. So here at Emirates NBD, we launched about 2 years ago, we launched a millennial-focused lifestyle bank called Live. Live is only mobile enabled, so there are no more channels than mobile. And instead of just showing itself as a bank, it actually blends a lifestyle value proposition with banking functionality. We were being quite successful with that bank, but we see a tremendous uptake now that COVID has kicked in. And one example is, so Live is now onboarding more customers every month than the rest of the bank, the traditional branches, plus the traditional channels of the bank. So we onboard more customers in Live every month than we do on the traditional bank. And the same is happening with our other digital bank that we've launched, which is E20, focused on small businesses and micro enterprises. Again, completely digital. It is thought of from the bottom up to be zero physical touch, completely digital, from onboarding to payments to lending. All those functionalities are completely mobile enabled and STP. And again, this is how we also see that small enterprises want to work with banks in the future. Now, what we are seeing in these digital-only value propositions, we are also bringing to the main bank, but this is a trend that will continue. The second thing is, while we push for this seamless STP bank, things like data are more important than ever. If you look end to end on how to digitize some of these processes, whenever there's an expert decision from a human in these projects, you have to replace it with some kind of decision mechanism that is automated. And that brings us to the question of data analytics and leveraging, so machine learning, whatever it is, to take those decisions automatically. So data will rise to become really, really important going forward. And finally, it's on the operating model, agility in this remote working model world, how to ensure that we have all the benefits of agile, these independent, self-driven teams that can take the decisions, move things forward, how to implement that operating model while working from home. That is going to be a challenge and a priority also going forward.
Thank you very much indeed. With that, let me move to a question that focuses pretty much on something that your bank is doing, Shanti. Your bank piloted an open banking platform some time ago. You built an API store. Your customers basically use, or can at least have the potential to use APIs to interact and to engage with your bank. And so how do these ecosystems, the APIs, change the way how your customers work with you? And I'm certainly sure you're focusing more on the consumer side, but can you also share some observations from business banking, corporate banking, as far as ecosystems and APIs are concerned?
So the open APIs, and the ecosystem that you talked about has helped us simplify integrating with multiple partners in a very short period of time. Yeah. So, for example, we've had, for instant consumer finance loans, for booking pre-approved loans, for tying up with, e-commerce partners for making offers to our customers, right? At merchant terminals to be able to offer EMI. Across the retail side, we have used these open banking and APIs to forge partnership very quickly to bring value-added services to our customers. On the wholesale side, actually, what we have done is we have, centered it around account services, which is, helping providing, we have a corporate mobility solution, which helps customers account balance, status, payments, collections, etc., which we have used these APIs to create more value for our non-individual customers. So both at the consumer end, where we have used it to integrate with ecosystems to be able to provide solutions, value-added services. We have also been able to use it on the corporate side for balances, for accounts, and for collections and payments, etc. I think we believe that the future belongs to ecosystems and working in partnership and collaborations. And that is why we've even upgraded our system to give us more APIs. I think it's going to be very critical to be able to integrate for speed, time to market, for more getting into the ecosystem for your customers.
Thank you very much indeed. And I hope that many banks will follow your example. Samir, you mentioned earlier on that your bank works in multiple African countries. You talked about acquisitions, subsidiaries of international banks. And I think this means you did not only have to work on your digital journey, but you also had to rationalize, maybe you still have to rationalize banking applications. So what were, in a nutshell, the major challenges and lessons learned?
Well, it's been a tremendous learning experience when you take a look at the varied markets where we have acquired banks. So key learnings there are that, there is nothing like a perfect model which you can have centrally as a group. Every country has its nuances. Every customer has their own maturity level in terms of transactions. Your customer base is different. So essentially, the challenges were the standard challenges in merging or creating a common technical pool of or a technical architecture. Essentially, if I were to talk about this from a key takeaway perspective, I think the criticality is again in getting your model right. you need to have a model, and we have built a 3-tiered kind of a model which talks about certain core applications which are cookie cutter. We just take them like a core banking. You don't change that core banking application, or a switch. You don't touch that switch because some of those processes are standard across most geographies. Then there's the middle layer, the ESB layer, or the APIs that we built. Those are the ones where we technically play around a bit because every country has local clearings or has local partners who need to be interfaced with. And that's where the APIs and the ESB helps. And then we have the channels layer, which has to be extremely customer oriented. And that's where the maximum number of, agility and customization happens. So that's the kind of a model which is helping us bring a certain level of optimization. And of course, the application base needs to be very specific to what the country or the bank in the country is offering to its customers. So that's what I would say. There is no one right fit kind of an answer to this, but yeah, you need to keep your wits around you, and you need to have a model which can be tweaked to a certain amount of flexibility. That's what I'll suggest.
Thank you. I'm glad that you say that there's no one-size-fits-all approach. With that, Miguel, a quick question. You talked about your digital-only brands for consumers, for businesses, for corporates. So if you look at them, you touch the topic. What is a key lesson learned that the main bank can get from the digital-only banks?
So several lessons learned. So the first one is on how they configure their value propositions, where their thinking is the only way to reach the customer is through this mobile app. How can I engage with them to provide an end-to-end fantastic user experience on these products and services that I'm making available to them? So if they want a credit card, how can I make it one click for them? And that kind of thinking traditionally is very difficult to have on a traditional bank, where you have functional departments, a lot of stakeholders. You have to involve people from risk, people from the channels, and people from the operation. So this way of thinking, which is you only have this app and you have to make it beautiful and a fantastic user experience, is really forcing them to think products and services differently. The second thing is on how we organize these teams. So instead of breaking them functionally, so we've set them up standalone with a clear leader there, but also all the competencies that they need to work. So they embed the risk people, even if functionally reporting to the risk, the chief risk officer, but the risk people are with them, the operational people are with them, the technology people are with them. So they are completely a blended team, and that of course makes it much easier to take decisions, to move things forward, and much faster in putting them in front of our customers. So that's a second learning, and of course a lot of those things also, which is a learning to us. If we really want this to happen, it can be brought to the main bank. So if you think about these two banks are more of our attacker strategy. How can we gain market share by exploring these innovative value propositions? A lot of what we are learning, we are bringing to the main bank for our defensive posture as well. Our mobile app in the main bank, it has to catch up and be as beautiful and as functional and as end-to-end automated as the innovative banks are doing. So that's a way that we are. It's possible to bring it back. It takes a huge effort from an organizational perspective, from an operating model perspective, to break these silos within the bank and enable this for the traditional functions in the main bank.
Thank you very much indeed. And I think there are plenty of follow-up questions that we could discuss, because I think this was a fantastic discussion today. However, we are already a little bit behind when it comes to the timing. So what remains to be said is thank you very much for your contributions, for the responses to the questions. I hope that you enjoyed the panel as much as I did. And I guess we have reached the end of the session. And the Finacle team asked me to mention that the recording will be available for registered participants, and they will be sending the link after our session. With that, thank you very much indeed, and enjoy the rest of your day.